Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. The top stories today. The President and federal officials prepare for another challenge during the pandemic. What looks to be an unusually active hurricane season ahead. The Trump administration is setting aside $10 billion for small business owners in low-income communities. Some businesses in New York City are eager to reopen. Locals who came out in support say the lockdown is making survival tough for small businesses. And the U.S. might revoke Hong Kong's special status. We look at the potential implications. Officials across the country are preparing for an active hurricane season. And this year, they also have to consider virus control measures.
With states reopening and some aspects of life seeming to return to normal, top federal officials prep the president on the challenges facing the country next and complications from the virus.
So the big concern this year is the Atlantic Ocean. We're expecting an above-average year.
Named storms, hurricanes, and major hurricanes are up, although that doesn't mean they will make landfall. And with nearly $80 billion in the Disaster Relief Fund, FEMA is running at almost double the funding compared to previous years. But FEMA Administrator Peter Gaynor said it could be difficult to maintain distancing measures during a disaster response.
Taking into consideration how difficult it's going to be to do the same things when it comes to mass care, sheltering, evacuation, when you weigh COVID-19 considerations on top.
These considerations also apply to how the authorities are handling immigration problems at the southern border. A federal official said that to avoid potential spread of the virus at Border Patrol facilities, they returned many border crossers to Mexico and the Northern Triangle within 2 hours. Hospitals near California's border noted the high numbers of virus patients are U.S. citizens who regularly pass over the border into Mexico. Tijuana is one of the cities in Mexico hit hardest by the virus, and it's close to the border. President Trump says non-U.S. citizens are being stopped at the border, but U.S. citizens can still enter.
Like I did with the China ban, we do have to allow people to come back into the country. We can't be that tough where we don't allow United States citizens to come back in, but they come.
Those who do enter are questioned about their health and subject to temperature checks and contact tracing.
More relief money is on its way to the most vulnerable communities. The Trump administration has set aside another $10 billion for their struggling small businesses. It'll be lent out by community development financial institutions.
President Trump's administration announced on Thursday it is setting aside $10 billion of additional funding for the Paycheck Protection Program. This comes as part of a second funding round under the PPP. It will be lent by community development financial institutions, which work to expand economic opportunity in low-income communities. As of May 23rd, CDFIs have approved more than $7 billion in PPP loans. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said in a news release, "There is bipartisan support for the move, which aims to ensure opportunities exist for small businesses in all communities to survive the pandemic." SBA Administrator Jovita Carranza said the capital was critical during the current economic challenges. PPP is a forgivable loan program aiming to sustain small businesses and jobs for their workers. It provides a buffer to help businesses during the economic downturn and be able to come out the other side intact and with staff in place.
The death of George Floyd has resulted in massive riots in Minnesota. The president has now directed the FBI and the Department of Justice to investigate Floyd's death.
The incident involving the death of 46-year-old George Floyd has now received attention from President Trump. He's directing the FBI and Department of Justice to investigate Floyd's death. In a Twitter post, Trump wrote, "My heart goes out to George's family and friends. Justice will be served." In the days following the fatal incident, a series of destructive riots were sparked in Minneapolis. Buildings and vehicles were seen engulfed in flames as protesters roamed the streets. Firefighters worked to extinguish the fires, but the damage was already done. Floyd died during an arrest. Video captured by bystanders shows one police officer pressed his knee against Floyd's neck as he was lying on the ground. St. Paul's police chief Todd Axel said that what happened is unacceptable.
It's disgusting, it's dehumanizing, and it's something that absolutely has to stop.
The 4 police officers involved have since been fired. The city's mayor and police chief are now seeking to prosecute the officer who allegedly choked George Floyd to death.
For the first time ever, bills were passed by proxy voting in the House. But a Republican-led lawsuit could end up voiding any bills passed under the new rule, if it holds up in court. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on that.
The vote by proxy system was used for the first time in the House this week, and it's helped pass a few bills. But House Minority Leader McCarthy is suing House Speaker Pelosi over the new rule, and he said whatever bills are passed by proxy voting could end up being unconstitutional if the court rules in his favor. Author of the Constitution study, Paul Engel, said that is the case.
But in effect, any act of Congress contrary to their commission is void. Those are the words of both Alexander Hamilton and Justice Marshall. If this is found to be contrary to their commission of the Constitution, it is void. It's like it never happened.
Basically, proxy voting allows a member of Congress to vote for others who are not present. Any member voting by proxy must send his decision for a bill in a letter or email to the member who will vote for them. McCarthy is fighting this because he said the Constitution's language requires the physical presence of officials to vote. Meanwhile, Pelosi says that the Supreme Court has made it clear that Congress sets its own voting rule and that proxy voting is to protect its members during the pandemic. But Engel says that a representative isn't completely fulfilling his duty if he's not there.
They were hired to go to the House of Representatives and represent the interest of their district. And that is not simply mailing in a vote. That was to discuss, debate.
The rule is in place for 44 days, and the House Speaker can renew it when that time's up. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
Many New York City business owners are anxious to reopen. Some are working with officials to negotiate, while others reopen in defiance of lockdown orders. Here's how businesses are trying to stay alive as the pandemic eases and amid persisting health concerns.
Many restaurant owners in New York City are waiting eagerly for restrictions on outdoor dining to be lifted. On Thursday afternoon, some people had drinks at standing tables outside Le Rivage restaurant in Manhattan's famous Restaurant Row. Before the pandemic, the street was often filled with Broadway theatergoers.
So right now we're dealing with the mayor's office and the community board, and what's going to happen here, because it's a unique situation, we have a Restaurant Row going over here. So the intent is to safe distance. We're going to close off the street, safe distance. We're going to have, like they do at the park and all the outdoor spaces, we're going to mark out, delineate all the 6 feet circles and everything.
Owner Paul Danamiel's goal is to reopen his restaurant and the entire Restaurant Row to outdoor dining. For now, the city's only allowing restaurants to offer takeout and delivery service, but some say the city isn't reopening fast enough. Elsewhere in the city, protesters gathered outside a tanning salon that was shut down after briefly reopening. Only businesses deemed essential are allowed to open right now. Sunbelievable decided to defy lockdown orders, and residents showed their support. The police issued the owner a $1,000 fine. The owner feels officials are not giving reassuring answers for when small businesses can reopen, and that staying closed is hurting his employees. He was willing to go to jail to make a statement, but then the future of his business was threatened.
And then a call comes from the mayor saying that if he doesn't shut down, he wants him locked up and he's going to take away his health department license. So for communism.
As police raided the Staten Island-based shop, protesters gathered under the banner, "All businesses are essential."
French health authorities are banning hydroxychloroquine in hospitals. One doctor says it's the first time ever he's been forbidden from administering a drug. Our France correspondent David Vivez has the story.
The French government on May 27th forbade hospitals to administer hydroxychloroquine as a treatment to patients infected by the CCP virus. Hydroxychloroquine is an anti-malaria drug used in some countries across the globe. President Trump has also supported its use as a preventative for the virus, even announcing he is taking it himself earlier this month.
A lot of doctors take it. I take it.
The ban of the drug by the French health minister follows a large observational study published in the well-known medical journal The Lancet. The study cast doubt on the efficacy of the treatment, adding there might be an increased risk of heart problems among CCP virus patients. The study, published in The Lancet last Friday, was conducted on over 100,000 patients, but it did not win the support of all scientists. In an open letter on Thursday, around 120 doctors across the globe addressed concerns regarding the statistical analysis and the data integrity of this study. The use of hydroxychloroquine has polarized scientists since the day it was released. This treatment was founded by a French microbiologist, Didier Raoult, who used it to treat over 3,300 patients with the CCP virus. According to him, most were treated successfully, with only 18 people losing their life to the virus. Some doctors want to have the right to prescribe it. This doctor, who joined the group Freedom to Prescribe, is one of them.
I don't understand. This is the first time ever that a government forbade us to prescribe a drug. Furthermore, it's a drug that I have prescribed for 40 years.
According to her, the Lancet study did not follow the specific treatment protocol designed by Raoult.
There is a problem with studies that oppose the use of hydroxychloroquine. Raoult's treatment protocol stipulates hydroxychloroquine should be prescribed at an early stage, not when the patient is hospitalized.
Dr. Regensburg also said doctors have full legitimacy and the knowledge to prescribe a drug they think can be effective, and that they should have the final word on this matter. David Vivez, NTD News.
Up next, a city of nearly 3 million in China's Heilongjiang province braces for a second wave of virus infections. Several neighborhoods are now locked down. Find out more when we return.
Hello there. Doesn't it feel like we're moving further away from the very values that our republic was built upon? And the media in our country have just been adding fuel to the flame, which is why you need to try The Epoch Times. It's pure, honest journalism that's restoring traditional values and reports the news with no spin, no hidden agendas, and no false narratives. So if you want to know the truth about the FISA abuse that took place during the 2016 election, or how socialist and communist ideologies have been infiltrating our society, or how the Chinese Communist Party's cover-up led to this global pandemic, and so much more, then you need to try The Epoch Times. And for a limited time, you can try the paper yourself for a full month for just $1, and we'll send you a very special gift. A 58-page magazine that investigates the truth behind the Chinese Communist Party's cover-up of the virus. So go to readepoch.com, try The Epoch Times, get your free gift, and stay truly informed.
A city of nearly 3 million in China's Heilongjiang province braces for a second wave of virus cases. Several neighborhoods are now locked down. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has the details.
Mudanjiang City only reported a handful of new cases of the CCP virus over the past few days, but it's still suspending 90% of scheduled trains with no specific notice on resuming service. Some schools are also closed again. On May 27th, Mudanjiang bus terminal was closed. At least 9 neighborhoods are now locked down. A May 25th video shows workers preparing to seal the entrance of a residential building with an iron fence. The person taking the photo says it's scary. Another video shows them installing the gate. A police car is parked close by. The entrance to this neighborhood is blocked. Local resident Ms. Zhen told us she doesn't believe the official figures. She said there should be more cases because the situation is serious. Many restaurants reopened for a few days and then closed again. Authorities use health codes to track who may have been exposed to the virus. Ms. Zhen says many people in the area can no longer leave the city because their health code has been downgraded.
I don't think it's only those few people who are infected. The government never reports accurate figures. The internet here is too heavily regulated by the government. Some messages are blocked even before you see them. Many accounts are also blocked, many chat groups.
Ms. Jin said many people, including herself, lost their jobs. There is no financial aid from the government, and she has to borrow money to make ends meet. Twitter recently fact-checked 2 of President Trump's tweets about mail-in ballots being vulnerable to fraud. Trump was outraged and accused the platform of political bias. The New York Post then pointed out the double standard to Twitter's spokesperson, saying dubious tweets by China's foreign ministry spokesman weren't treated the same. The tweets from March claimed the virus began in the U.S. rather than China. Originally, the spokesman said the labels would not be added at this time. But after reflecting, China's foreign ministry spokesman's tweets were also labeled with warnings for viewers to get the facts about COVID-19. The New York Times is reporting that the U.S. will cancel the visas of Chinese grad students and researchers who have direct ties to China's military. The ban would affect around 3,000 students. This comes amid concerns of national security threats, especially in the scientific sector. But if passed, China could impose its own visa restrictions on American students. And the FBI issued a notice after Chinese scientists pleaded guilty to stealing trade secrets estimated at $1 billion from a U.S. petroleum company. The FBI says it's just the latest example of the Chinese regime's systematic campaign to gain economic advantage by stealing the innovative work of U.S. companies and facilities.
The Chinese Communist Party passed draconian legislation yesterday to crack down on Hong Kong's pro-democracy protests. The United States will now likely revoke the city's special trading status as it falls under Beijing's control. That would mean massive changes for both Hong Kong and the Chinese mainland.
China officially passed legislation today to quell Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement that started last summer. The new law by Beijing will criminalize activities in Hong Kong that Chinese authorities deem security threats. China says the law will be implemented as early as August and that there is no need for approval from Hong Kong's legislature. The law also allows secret police from China to openly operate in Hong Kong. Opposition groups worry their activities will be banned. Critics say the law might destroy Hong Kong as an international finance hub. The city's prosperity relies on its freedom and rule of law. In response to Beijing's new law, the U.S. has declared that Hong Kong is no longer autonomous. That could lead to a revocation of Hong Kong's special status under U.S. law. The decision is in the hands of President Trump. The U.S. treats Hong Kong differently from mainland China under a 1992 act. If the special status is revoked, major implications are involved. Hong Kong exports would be subject to the tariffs and restrictions the U.S. put on Chinese goods during the trade war. And Hong Kong may also face restrictions when buying sensitive technologies from the U.S. Hong Kong dollars enjoy free exchange with U.S. dollars, which is also subject to change if the special status is no more. The city accounts for 2/3 of China's foreign investment inflows. The decline of the city as a financial center could hurt China's foreign investment. Beijing's infringement on Hong Kong's autonomy has also caused U.S. lawmakers to consider sanctioning Chinese banks operating in Hong Kong. The Senate has introduced a bipartisan bill that would punish Chinese banks that help Beijing's official enforce the new law. According to a Hong Kong media report, one option the U.S. has is to ban such banks from using the SWIFT system. The messaging system is essential for most banks to complete trades with other banks. This could bring substantial pain to China's economy, whose international business relies on dollar transactions that mostly happen in Hong Kong. Given the strict capital control, it will be hard for any mainland Chinese city to replace Hong Kong. Hong Kong protesters see Beijing's economic reliance on Hong Kong as one of the only leverages they have to argue for their freedom. The protesters have been pushing world leaders to reassess Hong Kong's autonomy.
And coming up, the UK opens its doors to Hong Kong citizens with special status British passports, and the EU unveils a €750 billion pandemic recovery plan. That and more after the break.
% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. This is a battle a battle between truth and deceit. Subscribe today and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
Now we head over to London, where the British Foreign Secretary is welcoming 300,000 Hong Kongers should China go ahead with its so-called national security law. Here's NTD UK's Neil Woodrow with more.
Thanks, Paul. Welcome to NTD UK, bringing you UK and European news. I'm Neil Woodrow. British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab says Britain will allow Hong Kongers with special British national overseas passports to be able to come to the UK. That's if China continues to implement the so-called national security law.
And we will remove that 6-month limit and allow those B&O passport holders to come to the UK and to apply to work and study for extendable periods of 12 months, and that would itself provide a pathway to future citizenship.
He said the UK is deeply troubled by Beijing's move and urged China to step back from the brink and live up to its responsibilities set out in the UK-China Joint Declaration, which dates back to 1984. Raab said the UK is discussing what steps to take next, along with Canada, Australia and the US. British supercar maker McLaren Group says it's cutting 1,200 jobs under a proposed restructuring programme as it deals with the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic.
The cancellation of F1 racing and a drop in orders for supercars amid the pandemic have hit McLaren's bottom line. The car maker builds cars for racing and the road. McLaren Group says despite cost-saving measures already in place, it has no choice but to reduce its workforce. The vast majority of the cuts will be in the UK. They amount to over a quarter of McLaren's 4,000-strong workforce.
McLaren chairman Paul Walsh says this is a challenging time, but they plan to emerge as an efficient and sustainable business. European Union's executive this week is unveiling a €750 billion plan to prop up damaged economies. That's about $875.5 billion. This proposed next generation EU plan sits on top of other stimulus funds already allocated.
And in sum, this would bring our recovery effort to a total of €2.4 trillion.
Under the newest plan, the EU would borrow funds from the market. €500 billion would be given out as grants, and the rest, about half that amount, would be loans to member states. The EU's 27 members have been squabbling over how to fund a recovery for some time. Though welcomed by Italy and Spain, the plan will face tough negotiations and could be blocked by more frugal states of the Northern Europe. The funding would start from next year and be repaid between 2028 and 2058. Canary Wharf, one of London's main financial districts, is ready to bring back to work up to half of the 125,000 people who usually work there.
Canary Wharf Strategic Director says over 500 processes from cleaning to how doors are used have changed.
And we believe that we're now what the government calls COVID secure. And we can cope with relatively large numbers of people keeping 2 metres apart.
But transport could still be a problem, as bus and rail services can only run at 15% capacity while 2-metre social distancing guidelines are in place.
The CCP virus crisis may be accelerating a move to a new type of office with people working from multiple locations, but Canary Wharf's Dorber says talk of the end of megacities like London is premature. England's test and trace system to help ease coronavirus lockdown has started. The plan asks every single person with symptoms to self-isolate and be tested. 40,000 specialists will help with the testing and identifying contacts. The government says this means a shift from a blanket lockdown to one that will focus more on local flare-ups.
This will help us restore some of the basic freedoms that matter so much to people and doing some of the things that people are yearning to do, like seeing friends and family, booking a holiday or getting a haircut.
At this stage, the plan will not include a phone app that continues trials on the Isle of Wight. Meanwhile, the lower house of French Parliament on Wednesday approved the government's contact tracing app. The Stop COVID application should be downloadable this weekend.
Following a debate, the National Assembly voted in favour of the Stop COVID app by a 338 to 215 margin.
I want to have the freedom of being aware before I'm contacted about potentially being a case of contact. I want the freedom to protect myself.
One of the important points discussed during the debate was about the potential risk to privacy.
I will not lie to you. I can never guarantee that there is zero risk. However, what I can assure you is that we have taken all possible measures, and I can also assure you that it is the most secure health file in France.
France's data privacy watchdog has said the app can be deployed, but advised further reviews after its launch.
Pompeii, the ancient Roman city buried by a volcano nearly 2,000 years ago, reopens to visitors after closing for the pandemic.
On Pompeii's first day of reopening since the pandemic, visitors were very few. Last May, 4 million people visited the site. But with social distancing rules, tourists can once again enjoy the ancient city and experience it in a unique way.
Even those who have already been to Pompeii should come back, because there will be openings of never-seen-before houses, never opened before gardens, new streets, and therefore it is really a new occasion to see Pompeii.
About 13,000 people lived in Pompeii when it was buried under ash, pebbles and dust. About 2/3 of the town is uncovered, and it's one of Italy's most popular attractions.
Starting June 3rd, Italy will end travel curbs and Europeans can visit freely. The Italian government hopes the holiday season will be saved. That's all from us here in the UK for today. Till next time, back to you, Paul.
Thanks, Neil. And still to come, global lockdowns have put many countries and lives on pause. But for one nurse from Missouri, the pandemic gave her a life-changing opportunity. Hear more about her story when we return. The pandemic has restricted almost everyone's freedoms in the United States, but for one nurse from Missouri, it's done the opposite.
It was the first time that I had ever seen the ocean.
Traveling to New York City marked the first time nurse Megan Lindsay had ever left Missouri. Aged 33, it's also her first time on a plane. She began working 12-hour shifts at NYU Winthrop Hospital's intensive care unit.
When I became a nurse, I always was very passionate about what it means to be a nurse, the calling of a nurse, and your duty to serve.
Her story is a contrast to the many that describe the suffering the virus has brought. She says the pandemic gave her the chance to strike out into the world, confront danger, and serve her country. Unfortunately, many of her patients were not able to overcome the virus.
Their families aren't allowed to be there with them, so I've had to stop being a nurse and step in for the family and sit down next to that patient and hold their hand so that they don't die alone.
Her 2 kids and husband, she said, are proud of her for conquering her fears. Her journey wasn't glamorous, but she says it sometimes felt like a grand adventure, from seeing the Statue of Liberty to hearing someone speak Russian to trying New York pizza for the first time. Now, at the end of her contract, Megan is unsure of what the future holds.
It did take a lot of guts and a lot of talking myself into doing it, but I don't regret it for one bit.
But for now, knows she made a big difference.
A French concert violinist who's accustomed to playing for audiences of 2,000 or more performed last night for an audience of 0. But he says the experience was none the worse for it.
Renaud Capuçon and his 23-person string orchestra performed Metamorphosen, a piece by German composer Richard Strauss, at the Philharmonie de Paris concert hall. It was their first concert after the lockdown.
Here, it's like a return to life. They're all really happy, the 23 soloists with me, to play again after such a long time when everything was closed. It's a bit like a sign of rebirth.
The auditorium can seat up to 2,400 people, but this time it was empty apart from 1 or 2 staff members. The orchestra members weren't required to wear masks, but had to stay seated at least 1 yard away from each other on stage. The Strauss piece is a mournful composition, and it ends on a somber note. Capuçon says that when he played it in the past, he always felt it would be appropriate if there was no applause. The outbreak now means the ending of the performance is met with silence.
It's a piece where we had always wanted to have no applause. Here it fits perfectly because we can stay in this type of long silence, and so for this piece here, it's not disruptive.
The audience was virtual. People watched and listened at home via live stream on the concert hall's website.
That's the latest updates for now. Thank you for tuning in.